So I think the Jewish community is facing increasingly these kinds of intellectual trials, so to speak. And I think it's a problem. And I hope when people see how absurd things are getting, they'll be less inclined to take these clowns seriously as leaders. But they will take seriously the things they're saying about who is permitted to be a Jew, and maybe open up the gates a little more, or at least stop closing them to different forms of Jewish expression and identification.
Welcome to Amusing Jews, where we celebrate Jewish contributors and contributions to American popular culture. I'm Jonathan Friedmann.
And I'm Joey Angelfield.
Producer-engineer Mike Tomren is working somewhere behind the scenes. Amusing Jews is a project of Adat Chaverim Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, the Jewish Museum of the American West, and Atheists United Studios. Hey, Joey. Satire serves an important role as a rhetorical weapon against authoritarianism, exposing the dangerous fear-mongering, destructive policies, and deplorable hypocrisy. And that's why fascists hate it.
We're excited to talk again with Eli Valley, a critically acclaimed cartoonist whose latest book is Museum of Degenerates, Portraits of the American Grotesque. Eli, welcome back to Amusing Jews.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Museum of Degenerates features cartoons spanning from 2016 to 2024, along with detailed essays describing the cartoons. What was the process of assembling the book?
Basically, it was a years-long process of going through the comics and the history that preceded the comics. Because we're in this, we're in an era of disinformation and of erasure of our past. And not partly accidental, but mostly methodical and deliberate on the part of oligarchs who are trying to contain and control information. And so a lot of the origin notes for these comics were sort of lost in the ether. And I needed to go back and look at my old notes, but also like looking at social media and the articles and quotes and statements from political figures and pundits that inspired these works. And it was important for me because of this, methodical disinformation to have in these essays the antecedents, all the evidence, the receipts, as if you will, so that partly because of the enforced amnesia, but also because my comics have so often been deliberately misrepresented by the most nefarious figures on the planet. And so this, if I have the receipts here, it's like, no, you can't make that accusation, or you can, but it's just like refuted immediately because here's 500 words giving you the quotes that are like this comics coming literally out of us. Well, anyway, so it was a multi-year process, unfortunately, because diving into these sewers of history to shovel out the shit that informs so much of this work was arduous.
Yeah, one of the things I took away from the book, and it is very recent history that you're talking about, is, this time period, 2016 to 2024, time is moving so quickly now that it's sometimes easy to forget, like the first Trump administration, for instance, because we're so knee-deep in this new one. Like, it was nice as a historical refresher and almost a history book in addition to being a satirical book.
Yeah, thanks. I think also, unfortunately, the alarmists from the first Trump administration, and I include myself among them, were correct. And I'm not saying to boast because I wish I wasn't right, but the people who are talking about, this is fascism, these are the first signs of fascism, were often laughed at or trivialized because, for all the reasons you can imagine. But now it's so much harder to deny it, although there are still people who will do that. But so the time capsule in the earlier parts of this book is frightening because the stuff that I depict is only more so today.
Yeah, it's said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. I would say that history doesn't repeat itself. Sometimes it gets worse.
No, it's true. I mean, some of the earlier comics, you try to be as hyperbolic as possible when you're dealing with hyperbole, like with a reality that's become sort of a parody of itself. But then a few years later, even, some of those earlier shots at hyperbole are just literalism now.
The book starts with a historical discussion of how the term degenerate has been used to censor and demonize artists whose work challenges norms and, very often, speaks truth to power. What makes art, and maybe cartoons in particular, such a threat?
A lot of these megalomaniacs don't like to see themselves parody. They're narcissists, and so they can't handle that. I mean, Trump is like a good example, obviously. Um, yeah, I guess satire cuts through a lot of the BS, and it's in many ways it is more universally um palatable, I guess. Not palatable because a lot of stuff is not palatable, but it can be absorbed more readily by a larger community of people than, for instance, essays, um, or, I mean, film is great as well. But I guess, satirical art, especially if it's one panel, is it like hits you single instant of recognition and it like leaves a lasting impression. Film can do that too, but it's like 90 minutes, so it's a different kind of experience.
Like you said, the megalomaniacs don't have a sense of humor also, and I think part of it is they can't understand things like symbolism and metaphor, and they just kind of have a difficult time probably with this whole world of subtlety or nuance, and they'd rather it not exist.
Yeah, that's true. Trump is a hard example though because he's such a self-parody in terms of his megalomania and his inability to ever concede. Like, he got it from Roy Cohn apparently originally, concede defeat, and his thing is attack, attack, attack always. Um, to the point of self-parody. Like even when he is giving a speech and he like flubs a word, he will not say, "Oh, my mistake." He will pretend that that word is part, the fake word is part of what he is going for, and then like he'll do something with the rest of the sentence um to sort of make up for it without just saying, "Oh, my bad." He will never say "my bad," except for sometimes he'll do like feigned self-deprecation, which is always part and parcel of megalomania. So it's not quite the same.
Yeah, I understand that Hitler could be quite charming as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Enjoying the show? Click like and subscribe.
You don't pull any punches in your cartoons, which combine scathing words and grotesque imagery. How would you describe your style or maybe your approach?
It's hard for me actually to describe my style, so it's a tough question. But I mean, I can talk about the physical lines, um, but in terms of like the emotional definition of what it is, it's sort of a visceral reaction from the gut to horrors that we are being thrust into. I mean, another way to describe my style, I said this, I think at the book launch, if when you're reading the news and your eyes start to bleed, metaphorically or whatever, symbolically, from the horrors, my comics are meant to be a salve for you if you are in the community of reality loving people who have a conscience and who are outraged by both the actions and the complicity of every single institution in the country that is welcoming in this onslaught of authoritarianism. This is a salve, like SALVE, like it's just sort of like a balm to put on your eyes, even though the art is really abrasive. The abrasion can actually sort of like release some of the tension of dealing with what we're all dealing with.
So I know that your cartoons are primarily directed at like-minded people to give us a sense of solidarity and that we're being heard and seen and so forth. But you also mentioned that some of the worst actors out there pick up on your cartoons and sort of spin it in a way that demonizes you. So I don't know if you're changing minds on the other side or you're infuriating the other side, even though you're, again, really making stuff for people like us.
I don't think I'm changing minds on the other side. It's not my goal. I don't, the side that we're talking about is entrenched, and I don't really see I don't see them as reachable, or it's not for me to reach them. Maybe someone else can do it, but no, it's but even pointing out hypocrisy it gets tiresome after a while. I mean, I don't want to just like the stuff that Trump is doing. There's no shame to it at all anymore. or like the Democrats, the leadership refusing to support Mamdani in New York, while doing targeted emails to New Yorkers asking for money and saying, "You need us. We're going to use this money to fight Trump," and then kneecapping, sabotaging one of the more vocal and hopefully powerful actors against Trump. So I don't think they are reachable. Although from the Democratic side, the goal would be to reach enough people, who are not in the leadership or the punditry or the not punditry, but like the consultancy, like the multimillionaires who dictate, who are often funded by billionaires, who dictate where the Democratic Party should go. For instance, Edward Klein saying that Democrats should reach out to anti-abortion activists, and that's how they should broaden their tent in that direction. Flying in the face of both morality, which is the most important thing, and also actual, on the ground, polls of what people want. So, but no, the hope is that outside of those people who I don't want to reach and I can't reach, they're too rich to reach. I would like to reach people who would be able to make an impression and change course. When we're talking about, for instance, Democratic Party, that could change the course of them, for instance. But obviously, I think the party is in many ways, it's. I don't want to.
We'll just call it a monstrosity.
It's a monstrosity. Yeah. Yeah. I just think it's like it's infrastructurally, it is built to lose, and it's built to assist the onslaught of fascism.
Two of the themes I see in your work is that criticism of Israel is not always anti-Semitic, while support for Israel is very often anti-Semitic. Why is this such a difficult thing for people, especially in Jewish circles, to understand?
Well, in Jewish circles, we are unfortunately the recipients and subjects of a multi-billion-dollar, I think you can say multi-billion with all the birthright, but definitely multi-hundreds of millions dollar propaganda and brainwashing effort that starts at birth and ends after death. Or I guess you could say at death. But funerals, Israeli flags, fascist flags at funerals. So, because of this indoctrination, we are, taught that our essence is Zionist. And if you are a Jew who takes pride and joy in Jewish experience outside of Zionist constructs, then you are self-hating because your self is Zionist. It has to be Zionist. That's the whole propaganda, and it's infantilizing, but it's the world we live in. And so from that perspective, if you are self-hating or even if the most vicious anti-Semites, if they support Israel, then they are not anti-Semitic. That's why you have many Jews who are Zionists support American fascists like Trump, anti-Semitic fascists like Trump, an administration of Nazis. Like one of the main figures that was going after Harvard for alleged anti-Semitism turns out to be a Nazi, right? Like maybe he didn't have a swastika on himself, but he was, putting out papers about Hitler and stuff. Just like the worst kind of anti-Semitic trash you can imagine. And that's what we have in the Trump administration, accusing Harvard of anti-Semitism. That is self-parodying. But if you're a Zionist, that's actually, he can't, doesn't matter if he idolizes Hitler. He's a Zionist too. He believes in ethno-nationalist Jewish state. Sure, he thinks we should all go there, but he's a friend of the Jews.
What do you make of Stephen Miller?
Not a fan. I've drawn many comics about him, so I don't know. It's hard to say in one sentence. I don't really think about him much anymore. He's the worst of the worst.
Yeah, I think he's a ostensibly Jewish guy cosplaying as a Nazi.
Right. Well, also, I think he's a good bridge between Zionism, Israel ethno-nationalism and ethno-nationalism here. Some Nazis will accuse Jews of wanting liberal social welfare causes in the United States while wanting ethno-nationalism in Israel. I think I'm consistent. I think ethno-nationalism is a danger to humanity everywhere. But someone like Stephen Miller is the opposite. He thinks ethno-nationalism everywhere is the way it should be. So he supports, the Israeli project as well as the Nazi project in the United States of a white ethno-state. Clearly, openly, brazenly. From his emails that got released in which he's like recommending Camp of the Saints, like Nazi Bible, to what he says to this day, speaking Goebbels type speeches at the Charlie Kirk memorial rally.
Your work is deeply rooted in Jewish imagery, history, and ideas, yet your critics paint you as a self-hating Jew and even an anti-Semite. Are they simply misreading your cartoons, or is there something else going on?
Well, I mean, they're misreading, but they're either deliberately misreading or it's because of what I just said about the Zionist inculcation and brainwashing. You can draw the most historically literate, like paying to Yiddish culture and history. But if it's black and white and you're not a Zionist, they'll say it's Der Stürmer. Because Der Stürmer is the only newspaper they seem to have read from the past 100 years because it's their only frame of reference for Jewish art.
Would you say today's self-hating Jews are the ones bending over backwards to placate anti-Semites supporting Israel?
There's a comic that's all about this. Trump is saying, our country's full. We have no room for animals. I would have told your shyster grandparents the asylum program's a scam. Also, Israel's your country. You don't belong here. I love you fucking Jews, you un-American money-grubbing piece of shit. That's Trump. And then the Jews, and one of them has to keep with 1488, the Nazi symbol on it, are saying, haha, yes, sir, fuck refugees. It's an invasion, an infestation. And yes, sir, we don't belong in America. 4 more years, sir. And then the last quote, self-hatred is the beacon of the Jewish left. One of these Republican Jews who love saying that the Jewish left is self-hating when they're dancing around an American anti-Semitic fascist. It's a shanda. It's always been a shanda. It's a shanda that these people that are represented in this comic are in charge of 90% of American Jewish organizations, communal organizations. That is a shanda beyond belief. Thankfully, the organization that you come from are not like that. Well, we'll find out after this comes out. But the other ones, tragically, have helped bring us to this point. And there is zero contrition. And there's only, in places like the ADL, there's just acceleration of the same shit.
At times, your cartoons have a personal angle. I'm thinking of your biting portrayal of journalist Barry Weiss, who launched a campaign against a presentation you were giving at Stanford University on Jewish art in an age of rising fascism. Could you take us through that?
Yeah, this was in 2019, and it was when Barry Weiss was, one of the opinion editors and a columnist of the New York Times. Her coterie was against me from the start, but I think Stanford was the sort of highest profile college that invited me, and so that was sort of like line in the sand for these for the Zionist Hasbarist propagandist rat fuckers. So before she joined the crusade, if you will, the local was it Stanford College Republicans, it's like far right Steve Bannon style, Peter Thiel style, anti-Semitic group, plastered student dorms with a drawing I did that was very Jewish from the forward. It was like showing like early 20th century Jewish intellectuals, and it was making fun of like sort of like fetishization of Jewish cultural stuff. It was very internal, very Jewish jokes, extremely Jewish, actually. It's absurd what happened, actually. And it was so Jewish that it was used by this Jewish student journalism conference on their tote bags. I mean, and so they took a panel from this cartoon pretended that it was anti-Semitic instead of like proudly Jewish, and then put a picture from Der Stürmer next to it. Okay. And they plastered student dorms and they put on it, spot the difference. Can you spot the difference between my very Jewish work and this anti-Semitic shit? And instead of throwing the Stanford College Republicans off campus for distributing Nazi anti-Semitism to freshmen dorms, right? Um, because Zionism is the only law of the land here, they weren't thrown off campus, and Zionist activists joined the fight in the most unseemly, mendacious campaign that I'd ever experienced to that point. And some law student who was also an acolyte or one of Barry Weiss's circle of propagandists wrote something saying that, I was endangering Jewish students and comparing me to terrorists, and that I should not be allowed on campus, that this was a danger to the Jewish world. When I was going to be talking, I was invited by JVP and SJP, one of which is a Jewish group. The other one has many Jews in it, to talk about, my Jewish art and other Jewish art from 100 or even more than a century of art and politics, but it's not allowed if you're not Zionist. So he put this out in the Stanford paper, and Barry joined the crusade by endorsing it, thanking him publicly from her title as the opinion whatever at the Times. Of course, that's a whole separate story about how the New York Times can recruit these people who are just, semi-literate propagandists and, professional liars. Just like it's an indictment on the Times. It's an indictment on the Times that she could not get fired. That, I'm sorry for getting all pissed off here, but like Sulzberger personally thinks that she did a great job with her mendacious articles and her smears against people. That's an indictment against both the New York Times and American oligarchy and dynastic heirs to our media institutions. Anyway, because of the efforts of Weiss and others, the venue was changed, the time was changed, it was closed to the outside, and it forced it into it was still allowed to go, but it was like through a lot of stress and a lot of effort on the part of, the organizing entities, SJP and JVP and students, activists, and myself. We were able to continue to have the presentation, but it had like a smaller, community of people that were able to be there because of the efforts of one of the most ardent McCarthyites in the past 100 years, Barry Weiss. And so, yes, that was personal.
And there's a pretty obvious irony with her as well, because she's been very vocal in criticizing schools that don't allow right-wing speakers.
Right. No, she's a professional liar. She's a professional liar, and her whole shtick is trying to open up the Overton window to more far-right and literal Nazi voices. That's why when Elon Musk, who had already embraced Nazism, wanted to make Twitter a home of American Nazis, he recruited Barry Weiss. She willingly came along to put out this absurd Twitter files nonsense that was cherry picking instances of very infrequent content moderation, for instance, of like January 6th, insurrectionists or literal Nazis, and acting like this showed that because of rare content moderation, that the far right was being suppressed. And Musk used that with Barry Weiss's full complicity to make Twitter the preeminent Nazi sewer that it has become. So, and as I say in the book, there's been no admonishments from anyone in Jewish communal positions of power within the Jewish community, because she's a Zionist, so she can work to get Nazis greater voice in the body politic, in our media institutions, and that's fine because she's Zionist. Currently, Larry Ellison, one of the reasons that he is recruiting her to, be the ombudsman or the news editor of 60 Minutes is because she pushes Zionist lies into every platform that she exists on, right? Most recently, famine apologia on Twitter and in the free press that she calls it. So 60 Minutes is going to turn into a mockery of what it used to be because she's been recruited for that purpose.
You mentioned sort of the McCarthyism era and how that has strong resonances with today. Could you speak a little bit about that as well?
McCarthy era was a very specific, you know, set of circumstances, with in terms of the politics and in terms of complicity of various institutions, including Hollywood, of course. Um, but and so today is not the same, but just in terms of, and obviously, back then it was all about communism. Today it's about other stuff. Among them, high up among them, anti-Zionism, or Palestinian rights, which is not necessarily the same thing. And so, like just like the very existence of Palestinian humanity, right? I mean, that is it is verboten, basically. And so we the the great free speech, danger, or the crushing of free speech now, just like there was crushing of free speech during the initial McCarthy era, now is people who protest our complicity in genocide and Israel's genocide. I mean, you have people who are being arrested and put in torture chambers for writing op-eds. That's happening now, and um, you know, um, people being deported or people having to scrub their social media if they want to come to study in the United States. People being expelled for protest. I mean, that's happening like, you know, uh, pervasively. It's astonishing that we are not covering this. Jake Tapper went on Seth Meyers' show in light of Jimmy Kimmel being canceled and then brought back. I don't know if when he went on, if it was before he was brought back, but he was like, "This is the greatest example of suppression of speech that I've ever experienced." No, actually, you were part of the suppression of speech of the past year, Jake, when you were vilifying campus protesters who were peaceful protesters who were arguing that their university funds should not be going towards genocidal, weaponry, etc., or any weaponry, and lying that they were anti-Semites and smearing them as people who wanted to make campuses free of Jews. And that led to a whole wave of stuff that is much, much worse than what happened to Kimmel. Obviously, what happened to Kimmel was intolerable, but it was, it's famous. And so he's a good example. I wish he used his pulpit, by the way, his platform, to call attention to the others. He used it a little bit to call attention to Trump's, general fuckery. But I wish he would use it specifically to call attention to the government cracking down on people who say Palestinians are human and who say that we should not be supporting genocide. But he hasn't done that yet. Anyway, so what's happening now is, I wasn't around during McCarthy, and so I only see I read about it and I see, especially in the film industry, like writers who came back. It's funny, like Preminger, Otto Preminger. I really like Otto Preminger, although Exodus, not so much. But he actually had blacklisted writers write Exodus, right? It was Leon Uris who wrote, but I mean, he had, so it's kind of like a little bit thorny there because, I'm happy blacklisted writers were, brought back, and it was good of him to do that, but also Exodus.
Exodus was a great piece of propaganda.
Exactly. So it's like from one to the other. But anyway, so I can't say I can't give it a one-to-one correspondence. And after this era is over, we'll have histories and we'll be able to understand it a little bit better. But just in terms of expression of speech, we've experienced nothing like it since the initial McCarthy era. What is happening now? And it's a real shanda that no news organization talks about this, what is happening, why it's happening, etc.
One of your more direct and visually provocative cartoons is Never Again Illustrated. showing a group of Jews who were sent to a Nazi concentration camp saying, "Never again will our ethnic cleansing nightmare be invoked to stop an ethnic cleansing nightmare." You drew it in 2019, and it's maybe even more relevant today. What's the backstory?
Well, back then there was a huge national conversation. Do you guys remember this when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez condemned the concentration camps on our border, and then using the word concentration camps in this like widely disseminated, I think Instagram live video, right? And then she was attacked throughout the right, but included in the people that were attacking her, like were little runts like Ben Shapiro, but also actual Jewish organizations were attacking her, or like condemning the comparison, saying that that it was inaccurate and it was offensive. And to me, that was just like, actual Holocaust scholars were saying that she was accurate. She didn't call them death camps. She said they were concentration camps, and that they were literally, that's what they were. So, it's like the difference between the actual scholars, just like today with genocide, difference between scholars and polemicists who are in charge of organizations is vast. And unfortunately, we should be listening to the scholars, but we end up always listening to the organizational heads, because those are the people with power. But anyway, back then, the organizational heads were essentially saying that the whole idea of never again, which is a sort of like a call to action, is the opposite of that. It is actually something we should quarantine our history and has no relevance to anything else. It is interesting, though. I mean, yes, today it is relevant. I don't know if it's more relevant, but it's relevant in other ways regarding the genocide, and people saying that we should not compare what's happening in Gaza to what happened in Europe. And but from that perspective, it's more the sort of Jewish, what's the word, struggle, or the two ideological approaches between particularism and universalism. I'm a universalist. You guys are too, I assume, at the secular foundation. Universalists say that our experience should be a sort of a galvanizing point to help us stop it from happening to any other community in the world, and I think that's a great humane lesson from the Holocaust, whereas particularists say the lesson of the Holocaust is everyone hates the Jews, and we are the only people who will protect us, and so that is a core of Zionism, and they say it explicitly that that is one of the reasons Netanyahu has been, or Israeli polemicists have been saying never again is now regarding Gaza. They're mostly doing it to try and co-opt the term from Jewish groups on the left, who are saying it, but they're also doing it because they see everything as a potential Holocaust of Jews, and that's the only lens through which they will act on the injunction of never again, something I disagree with.
What's the best way for our audience to keep up with your work and support it?
Well, my name at all the social media things. I have a Patreon, which is a great way to support me. I don't update it all that often, partly because I don't really think my patrons, whenever I do update, I get like 2 likes and 0 or maybe 1 comment. So I'm just like, maybe they prefer me to just like go my own. But it is extremely helpful in this period, especially. So there's that, and the Instagram and the other places, Twitter and Blue Sky, my name. And Museum of Degenerates is available. Probably the best place to buy it is directly through the publisher.
Thanks so much for joining us again, Eli.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks for give and take in the question and answers. It's nice.
And to our audience, now back to your regularly scheduled lives.
Amusing Jews is here to amuse you. If you like being amused, go ahead and click like and subscribe.